Good morning, good afternoon and good evening. Welcome to Diversity Network's Recruitment Summit. I'm Elizabeth Galvin and today we welcome Joanne Lockwood. She is a diversity, inclusion and belonging expert who engages with organisations to develop policy and best practices to be more inclusive for all people. Her company is called See Change Happen. Additionally, Joanne promotes transgender awareness and support to businesses and organisations throughout the UK, Europe and beyond. She developed strategies for allies programmes and assisted in policy and LGBTQ+ inclusion. Joanne is a keynote conference speaker, podcaster, blogger and panellist. She is an advisory friend of the Institute of Equality and Diversity Professionals and a subject matter expert for the School of Health Sciences at the University of Southampton. As a fellow for the Royal Society for the Encouragement of Arts, Manufactures and Commerce, she believes passionately that people are people and no matter who they are, deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. Joanne lives by the mantra of smile, educate and engage in order to promote awareness and understanding to overcome people's fear of getting it wrong. Because, as she says, the world isn't only black and white. Today, Joanne will be speaking about techniques for attracting and retaining diverse talent. Welcome, Joanne.
Hello, Elizabeth. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It was quite a long introduction, wasn't it? You sat very patiently there. You've done a lot of things, haven't you? You're very accomplished. So we're very pleased to speak with you today.
Thank you.
Well, firstly, let me start with this, which is probably a key question for recruitment, for fair recruitment. Can you outline the difference between diversity and inclusion?
That's a good question, because I guess we hear it banded around, diversity inclusion, almost like one word or one phrase. And very rarely do people stop and pause and reflect on the difference between what diversity means and what inclusion means. So it's a really great question to start with. For me, diversity is the mix. We're all unique. We're all different. Even from the moment we're born, our paths diverge even from our identical twin. So we are all different, with different ways of thinking, different ethnicities, different faiths, different belief systems. Some of us see pictures in the clouds, some of us are logical, some of us are artistic. So no two people are identical. So diversity is the mix of people. And for me, inclusion, that's the emulsifier. That's the bit that gets us to stick together, to give us that shared passion, that shared engagement. So what inclusion means to me in society is feeling part of society, represented in society. And when we think about business, inclusion is about allowing your teams, your staff, your colleagues to work together from their different backgrounds, their different faith and ethnicity. And inclusion is where the magic happens. It's bringing people together on those shared goals where everyone feels they can be themselves.
I love that quote, where the magic happens. That's really inspiring and very true. So why is it important to resist the temptation to focus solely on diversity, which is essentially a numbers game, and not on inclusion and belonging, which is, as you said, which will help to foster employees and retain them for longer?
Well, for me, I often hear organisations that talk about diversity hiring, diversity targets, and I sometimes ask organisations, why are they doing this? What's their why? Have they understood why it matters to them? Or what their objectives are, what their goals are through this diversity hiring or this diversity initiative. And very often it's kind of, they feel like they should. There's this kind of feeling that, oh, we better hire more women. We need more women on our board. Or we, in the light of Black Lives Matter, the awareness has gone on throughout the world since the murder of George Floyd. We talk about creating a greater ethnicity mix. We've got to understand about structural and systemic racism in society and also how it may be prevalent in our organisations. So we think by hiring diversely, we're going to dilute or fix the problem. And I would say that you can't hire your way out of a toxic culture. What you really need to do is clean the tank first. You need to root out the nasty smells, making sure that you fix the culture. Because if you hire new people, you bring new fish into a toxic tank, all that happens is the new fish will die or get ill in the same as everybody else. So first of all, it's really, really important to fix your organisation first and don't think you can hire your way out of it. And sometimes it is a numbers game. And I appreciate that some people realize that they need to do better. And I think that's honest. Say out up front, we need to do better. We haven't got a great track record on ethnicity representation in our organization. We haven't got a great reputation for women on the board, for women in senior leadership roles. If you're honest about it and be authentic about it, then you can invite people in to your organization and say, look, we haven't been good enough. We want you to join us, knowing that we want you to be part of our journey to take us to where we want to be. And this is why it matters to us. Because just by ticking the box isn't a good enough reason. Why does it matter? Because what we need to do here is focus on the outcomes, creates this better culture within the organization, it ensures that you're relevant to your customers, your clients, your stakeholders. You become aligned and become relevant in today's world, in maintaining that sort of contemporary feel. Because what happens if you don't attract diverse talent, you don't retain diverse talent, you cease to be representing the people you want to serve. You've got a diverse customer base, you should have a diverse employee base, colleague base to support the people you want to serve. So I think that's the essence of it. And then we talked about inclusion, where the magic happens. Really going on beyond that, if you can get the culture right, then belongingness is where the real extra magic can happen. And the fairy dust goes in there, because at that point there, my personal values align with the organizational values. At that point there, I feel part of the overall mission. I've got passion and purpose. I will give my all for the organization, because I could be included in an organization that doesn't meet my values. So I may work for a company that doesn't have a great track record on environmental issues, and I'm a passionate environmentalist. So I will never feel that belongingness with the organization, because there's a misalignment of our core values. So belongingness to me is where my values and the organization's values meet and match. And that's really where we start to get people engaged, people wanted to work with the organization for longer, retention goes up, productivity goes up, and just generally people will, it's where people start oozing that recommendation for this is a great place to work, where personal values and organizational values align, which goes beyond that just pure inclusion.
And I suppose that snowballs then, doesn't it? Then we'll attract others like that. So the company will continue in that direction.
Oh, for sure.
So on to a practical question then. How can we reframe the way we describe roles in adverts to attract a good mix of candidates from the start?
Well, what I always say to companies is, when we talk about diverse hiring or diversity hiring, for me, that puts a picture in my mind. We're automatically thinking about gender or race or disability or LGBTQ. And it also comes up in mind is if for a diversity hire, you're hiring for diversity, people often believe you're hiring for second best, because there's this myth of meritocracy we keep talking about. The best person gets the job. If the best person gets the job, then it's always been the white guy. The straight white man has always got the job. Therefore, they must be the best for the job. They're the de facto in the market. They've worked for the big organizations. They've got a better CV, better track record, because they haven't had to stop, get a family. They haven't had the disadvantages of a background, or they've had more opportunities given to them over the course of their careers. Okay, many people do work very hard for those opportunities. So I think we need to reframe it and stop calling it diversity hiring or diversity targeting. I think what we need to do is hire for representation, to be representing your client base, your communities, the market in which you live and serve. So that may well be working with minority groups, underrepresented groups, marginalized communities. And when we think about how do we recruit people from those markets, we've got to think about how they're going to resonate with your company. Again, we talked at the beginning about creating this culture, positive culture of representation. So if people from a marginalized community look at your organization and think, they're not the kind of place I want to work at, or I don't believe that they have the same values as I do, the culture could be toxic. You read Glassdoor, you look on LinkedIn, you look at other people's stories, you look on the website, you look on Twitter feeds, you just don't see yourself represented. So I think the hiring process, the question you ask, how can we reframe how we describe the roles in adverts? I think what we need to do is start way before that. Way before that is about fixing the organization first. Hiring is the last element of that process. So we've got to look at how are we perceived from the outside. What does our website say about us? What is the CEO advocating? Does the CEO champion anti-racism? Does the CEO champion anti-sexism, violence against women and girls, whatever it may be, whatever the contemporary issues of the day are? Is the CEO out there making public statements? Is there corporate allyship? If the company is explicitly in that frame, advocating for minorities and marginalized groups, that is the first step. Authentically, this is not just about pink washing, putting a rainbow on it, making a couple of bland Black Lives Matter statements. This is real positive targeted action. The causes they support. Then it's around the recruitment marketing, making sure the recruitment marketing does resonate. The adverts represent the organization that has a fair mix of people. The adverts are targeted to the communities and the language that they represent. It's not just a case of putting your advert through Textio and hoping it's going to neutralize the gender or make it more racially acceptable. It's really looking at the job description and thinking, right, how can we attract someone? What's important to that community? Are you offering childcare? Are you offering flexible working, agile working? Do you have LGBT, ERGs, staff networks? How are you mentioning that as part of the recruitment pack? So when I apply, I know already that there's a safe zone for me in the organization. You're already thinking about me. So that's where I would want to see it happening. And I also believe that we need to collect demographics. I know collecting demographics in different territories in the world has different legal implications about what questions you can ask, what questions you can't ask. Because unless you know who's going in top of funnel, who's being attracted, how can you know if your marketing is working? If you're trying to apply the Rooney Rule, if you're trying to apply other strategies to making sure that you are creating representative hiring, how are you tracking that? How are you measuring that? It's all very well doing blind hiring, using anonymous CVs, etc., etc. But if you're trying to target and trying to make a real difference, how can you do that when you're blind? You just have to hope that the right people are going into the funnel. Again, I think you should also analyze the funnel as well, the whole candidate experience. If you know you've got 50-50 men and women going into the top of the funnel, but you're only getting men at the end, where is that breaking down? Are you being biased through the process? Are you turning people off? The people you're attracting not the right skill? Or have you got an over expectation of the skill? Are you creating false barriers to people joining? Where many people from marginalized or underrepresented communities or women aren't ticking that box. The meritocracy bar is set too high, or it's too biased in favor of other candidates. So by having the stats, by having the data, by being able to track it through the funnel to the point of hire, then you can start to analyze. And sometimes you need to be really honest. None of the above. You get to the end of the process, none of the above. We need to go out again. So often I hear people say, well, we've got to get these hires, we've got to fill these recs in the next 2 weeks. We've got a really aggressive timescale here. Sometimes to get the right people from the right communities takes time. Maybe you have to change the hiring team. How often do we hear there are no good women in tech? How do I find a specialist black lawyer? Well, go and ask specialist black lawyers where they trained, which universities they go to, which colleges. Ask the people from those communities. We know the old adage, if your team is not winning, change the manager, change the coach. Sometimes you may need to change the hiring team or refocus the hiring team to get a different mix of people into the organization. So that's probably a few things of a good place to start.
I mean, that's very practical as well, and also to perhaps change the expectations of how long recruitment takes and the different processes, analysing it. They're really good points, Joanne. Well, once a candidate is recruited then, how can we ensure that employees are well supported from the moment they enter an organisation and throughout their onward career? And how best is it to foster diverse talent throughout the company?
Another great question. I mean, I see this all the time on LinkedIn or Facebook groups where people have started working for great companies, and pre-start date, they're already been given loot boxes or merch or t-shirts and hats. It may seem very superficial, but it's already starting to communicate to that new hire that they feel valued for that first moment. And when they start, obviously we're all going through onboarding processes. It's a bit more complicated with COVID, with lockdowns. A lot more people are working agilely or working from disparate locations, not in the office. So you've really got to make people feel that sense of belonging straight away, that they are valued. You make time for them. You set expectations during the onboarding process. You make sure that there are keep in touch days, that the teams, the leaders, the managers are all proactively thinking about how this person's experience is going to be. And it's about, inclusion, I always say, is how you make me feel by how you treat me. So if you treat me in a good way, I'm going to feel included. If you treat me in a different way, I'll feel tolerated or excluded. So from that initial point of offer, how do we make people feel? How are we managing that candidate, that onboarding process? And I think that's the key thing, that first impressions, making sure that person is signposted to the relevant support networks, that they understand their career path, they understand what learning and development, what training is available to them. And it's really creating that sense of belongingness where they really are made to feel welcome. So I see so many organizations that just hire people and then they don't invest time. They're almost like, there's your chair, there's your phone, get on with it. And it's really trying to bring people in, making sure that you have, certainly in lockdown, making sure that their mental health is catered for, the resources, checking and making sure they're okay, having mental health initiatives, having support initiatives, having staff network initiatives, and creating that sense of bond and teamness. I mean, it may well be the person doesn't feel naturally aligned to any specific staff network. Maybe they don't feel their need, But even men have challenges with mental health. They have challenges with prostate cancer. And men have financial difficulties and pressure of work being them. So I think we have to recognize that everybody, even though we may perceive someone to be a privilege, has needs and needs a support network. So I think that's how I would do it. Map out people's career. Again, make sure we hold demographics. We understand who's getting promotions, who's getting positive appraisals and performance reviews, who is maybe at the offboarding or when you leave an organization, analyzing why people are leaving. Again, keeping demographics. Because if we can track people from pre-hire to exit, we know where people are falling off the conveyor belt. Why are people being broken? Why do people not want to stay? So really look at the tenure. If we've got a low retention rate, why? If we've got low turnover of women, why is that? Using employee engagement surveys to understand what people really feel about the organization, and then take action from those insights. So have a well-being team, and that sits maybe within human resources, it's within the people function or the D&I team, where people are constantly looking at well-being and that belongingness and keeping that culture alive.
And I suppose, again, it's the expectation, isn't it? And possibly the time frame. These things, I guess, take time to build up and get, as you say, the right people working in HR and recruitment to make sure those systems are in place. And I suppose, as you said, maybe if someone doesn't feel as if an employee resource group is for them, setting up another one, or setting up other groups for new people coming in. Could I ask you a bit more about employee resource groups and how important they might be for retaining staff?
Yeah, I mean, I see employee resource groups providing several core functions. One is to create that psychological safety environment for the people who resonate with that resource group. It's a way you can unload, you can really truly be yourself. You can mix with people who understand some of the struggles and issues you're going on with. They may be able to provide mentoring support, one-to-one support through the ERG, or just someone else who understands your particular struggle can put their arm around you, virtually put their arm around you and say, how can we help? So I think they're really great for psychological safety, creating that bond. And also, they also spotlight and focus important elements of whatever that support group, that ERG supports. So Black History Month, International Women's Day, they will help champion and amplify the causes that employee resource group supports. I also think that the employee resource group is also a resource for the organisation. Is the organisation asking the resource group for help on key issues? Is the organisation allowing the ERG to have a voice, to champion causes, to influence the direction of the company, influence the direction of the culture, influence the product line, design? Are the ERGs looking at customer complaints? So I think we could do far more with it. But I always say, don't treat your ERG as free labour. It's if you ask in your resource groups to help and get involved with the company, make sure it's done in company time. You're not asking people to volunteer. It's got to be a part of their job role, and making sure we don't burden people with voluntary commitments where the ERG is for their benefit. If the company wants to use it, the company should own it and pay for it as well. So yeah, very, very key. If the company has, I think the company can get benefit from resource groups over and above the support it can give to the members. I also think it's really important for the ERGs to work together, have a network of networks. Don't be in isolation, because we know that many people fit into different resource groups. So we don't want people being in the gender resource group, the faith resource group, and the ethnicity resource group, and the LGBT resource group. There's no crossover. So I think it's really, really important to get the ERGs to coordinate and collaborate, and making sure they are sharing best practice, talk about the issues intersectionally.
Well, I guess that would help, it would help each other that way, and maybe make them more efficient and more effective as well. And if a new one is beginning, I guess it's useful for people setting up that ERG to speak to existing ERGs as well. To get
and give them support. Big organisations have comms teams, they have graphics, marketing teams. Lend them the resources to make sure that they are producing top-notch materials, the communications are going out, and they are professional, and they represent your organisation. So I think there's a lot you can do to support them, and not see them as a kind of a little village fete in the corner. It's more than just cakes and coffee and singing Kumbaya and following the hashtags. They are a powerful resource that the organisation can leverage for creating that well-being of their teams.
That's true. And why not use the resources of marketing and graphic design as well to produce something professional and powerful?
Yeah, give time, host webinars, lived experience. Really use the ERG to amplify and to create a spotlight and exemplify best practice. So I think there's great ways you can use the ERGs.
And a way to help retain staff as well, and help their path throughout the company, throughout their career. And finally, can you talk about the role of stay interviews and exit interviews? You touched on those earlier, and how to keep in touch with what employees think about a company.
Yeah, I mentioned employee engagement surveys. I think those are critically important. I also think it's the role of the inclusive leader is to be in touch with their team, have one-to-ones, have 360 mentoring programs. I think mentoring programs are really, really important when we're looking at trying to nurture and develop talent in the organization, especially if we're trying to bring underrepresented, marginalized communities and give them a voice in the organization. Then senior leader champions, senior leader mentorship can give a great way of doing that. But I always say that the key thing is, if you're not sure how to support someone, ask them. They know what what makes them happy. They know that's challenging in their life. So I think creating a culture of listening is an excellent way of doing that. And the purpose of the stay interviews or the exit interviews is listening. But I was frustrated with exit interviews is the horse has bolted at that point. Why should you be burdening your leaving employee with having to tell you why they're leaving sometimes? If you get to that point there, surely you've already broken them. You haven't met their needs, whether it's reward, whether promotion, whether it's the culture. Yeah, some people leave because they're relocating. There's a whole load of factors why people leave, and it's not your fault, if you like, as an organization. But there are lots of people who leave because of a bad culture, bad management, bad leadership. And I think at the exit interviews, it's a bit late to ask that question. But I think it is important to gather that data and then feed it back into the process, understanding who's leaving, why they're leaving. I'd like to think if you've got a mature employee engagement program and a mature culture program within the organization, then it shouldn't be a surprise why people are leaving. If it is a surprise, then you should be looking yourself in the mirror and going, well, we don't know ourselves very well here. We're missing a trick here. But yeah, I think so. The role is a bit late. Yeah, too late, I think, is the role of an exit interview. But it may well help. It may well help. And even if you don't actually have the exit interview, make sure you collect the data on who they were, what their demographics are, who they work with, and put that into the people science and analyze why people are leaving from a particular department, from a different ethnicity, and truly understand that what it's telling you. Because then you can start having a view on your culture, a view on the toxicity, or just a view on what people actually think of your organization, and not dismissing it and going, well, people leave, oh, well, they weren't right, we'll move on, which is often what happens. It's almost like a divorce, isn't it? They take your keys to the car and kick you out the back door and say, don't come back. And I think we have to recognize that many organizations still behave that way, rather than seeing it as a loss, rather than seeing it as a failure on the organization's part not to retain that person.
Yes, and I suppose, as you say, it is too late, really, the exit interview, isn't it? That person has gone, that talent has gone, and you might be able to find out why, but you can't necessarily fix that. So I guess it is creating a listening culture. Maybe that would be the point of stay interviews and employee engagement surveys as well. Would that help to prevent that?
It doesn't have to be a divorce. It doesn't have to be a falling out. And so many people are just ushered out the back door the moment they hand their notice in. It's almost like you get a zero notice, you're out now. And I think that's so sad, because there's a breakdown of trust. There's a breakdown of how you see that person. And it doesn't have to be that way. And I think you can keep in touch with people. People have built bonds with staff, with other colleagues. So what does it say about you as an organization if your friend is suddenly whisked away, exited? You want to create a positive impression. You want to celebrate their leaving and make everybody feel valued and go, we're really looking forward to this person having great success in the future. You're obviously welcome back. We'd love to have you back. So create that really positive experience about it as an organization, and ask the employee that's leaving, can you keep in touch? Is it okay if we write to you in 6 months to check you're okay? Please keep them on the database. The alumni programs for people who are leaving to have families. How can you bring them back? Returner programs, mid-career pivoting. People take a career break, they're going to do something else. They may want to come back in 10 years. So really just nurture the people with keep in touch and get their permission. Is it okay if we keep in touch? We'd love to tell you about what we're doing. We thought you were great when you worked here. And if you ever want to come back, we'd love to have a chat with you. I think those are great ways of keeping in touch with people. And people's lives change, think the circumstances change. 3, 5, 10 years time, this person will think, oh yeah, they were a great company to work for before. I'd love to have a chat. I'd love to come back. My family's now grown older. I've got time on my hands. Can I come back, please? Can I do a different role?
Yes, and I suppose that that sort of links back, doesn't it, to the very beginning, why you recruited that person in the first place, making them feel welcome and included, and maybe they are going to a competitor's organisation, or but essentially the skills and knowledge they learned in that job role, there's a reason why you employed them in the first place, isn't there? So it makes sense, doesn't it, to stay in touch and hopefully return. And as you said, people leave for different reasons as well, don't they? Circumstances and family reasons.
Yeah, I think sometimes companies are overly paranoid about, okay, if you've got secrets, you've got real competitive advantage over somebody else and someone leaves. At that point, it's too late. You've broken the relationship way before that. If you start to not trust them as they leave, if you're paranoid about what people are doing, you'll be spying on them, keeping tabs on their computers, checking their emails, whole load of bad practice you're probably doing already if you're not going to trust your people. So maybe look in the mirror once more and say, what does that say about us if we're behaving in this way?
Well, thank you very much indeed, Joanne. You've shared some really insightful and practical advice there, as well as some of your more general theories about D&I recruitment, which will be really helpful for our listeners. Don't forget, you can hear more great stuff today at our Recruitment Summit. The next session will start on the hour. See you there soon.